Welcome to PT Podcast 14 with Eric, Leader of Learning at PT National. So today's PT Podcast will be focusing on the collective goal. So what corporate social responsibility do we have as fitness professionals and coaches within the fitness industry? And it's a conversation that I have quite common with the community in which we work with, and how that the people that we train, including our clients or the learners, what impact does that have on the second tier, third tier, and fourth tier down the track? So, for example, if we're educating a client on nutrition, for example, and healthy eating guidelines, how does that apply to their family household? In many cases, the female clients are the ones that will cook food for the family, and how does that then roll down into how they educate their children and so on, or how do they tell their other family and friends? So we do have a responsibility as fitness professionals to pass on correct information, but at the same time to live and breathe what we do each and every day. We have a responsibility here that we don't acknowledge our staff to eat fast food, for example, because we like to practice what we preach. And also our employees participate in personal training sessions with our trainers at least one day a week to show that we are a healthy lifestyle. And it's something that we want to filter down into their families as well. And it is really nice to see that this social responsibility that filters through what we practice does impact our families. But one thing that's come up a lot in recent times, in the last couple of weeks, is what responsibilities do we have as fitness professionals and coaches regarding beginning clients in the gym? How hard can you train them? And even though they have this desire to move fast and move forward really quickly, we have a responsibility to slow them down and to teach them the fundamentals, because a lot of clients don't have a sporting or a fitness platform in order to go from. And then a lot of the times you hear me talk about the training age. And if someone is a level 1 or a beginning training age within only 1 year of training, and they want to push hard and increase their ability very quickly, the flip side is that their ability to acquire an injury is just as rapid. So as a trainer, do you want to accept that responsibility? So the theme today is looking at what we can do, what strategies we can do from all aspects of health and fitness. So one aspect you need to look at first and foremost is that you have a leadership responsibility. So within your gym, your box, your studio, or even if you train clients at home, you have a leadership role. And within that role, you must work with your clients, but also lead them in the right direction, because you do have the knowledge and skills to prescribe the right exercises for them. So for example, I was treating a client the other day, and very eager, very keen. However, I felt there was a lot of joint laxity, meaning that they were quite mobile, and they needed to do fundamental movements before they even progressed to, the high functionality stuff with power included in that. Now, whether you can get this across to clients is a different story. So you have a responsibility to slow them down and try to educate them, whether it's physically on the floor training them, or whether it's just passing on information, or even writing a training program for them to show them that sometimes less is more. Sometimes looking for into the future is great, because then they see the common goal of where you're trying to go. So if a client does come along and they're trying to increase the sporting or training ladder very quickly in a rapid pace, what should you do? So a fundamental program will basically revolve around proprioception, balance, and stability. When you've got those in place, you also must align it with flexibility and mobility. So you need to look at different movement patterns that will assess whether they are overpowering certain muscle groups or underutilizing certain muscle groups and so on. Unless that is conducted, so this is therefore a formal assessment. Whether you want to do it formally with them in a room, whether you want to do it on the floor while they're exercising, you should be continually assessing your clients. So what are the most common things that I look for with clients on the gym floor setting? Gait pattern is number one. So the way they walk. So I assess them when they walk in the door, even though they don't know that. I do the whole hello, how was your day, things like that. But really, I'm looking at the way their shoulder is, whether one side is dropping, whether they're rotating a bit more in that transverse plane, and whether their sagittal plane, they're dropping to one side in their hip, or maybe when they're standing, they're leaning to one side. These are things that we should be doing in that relaxed setting. And that's our responsibility. And once I can see those general patterns, then I might assess that with actual exercise. So it might be a body weight squat, or riding the bike, or on the rowing machine, and so on. And I'm looking at these movement patterns in the posterior chain, in the frontal plane, and whether they are aware of these things, because I'll tell you now, 95% of the time, they have no idea what's going on with their body. Now, we are movement specialists. That's what we do. So assessing them in a relaxed state, in a conversational state, would be number one for me. Then you can go a bit more prescribed, get them to do some basic exercises. I love the lunge, but the lunge is dangerous at the start of a training program, because it's balance, it's stability, there's a lot of knee pressure and so on. And if they don't have this symmetry, you can really notice a lot of things, but at the same time, you may injure themselves. So that is something I tend to refrain on, even though I would love to prescribe it. So I might throw in a step up instead. Through a step up onto a bench, I can see whether the glutes are activating or firing up, and so on. So after I've looked at the basic patterns and feet and gait pattern, I want to look at breathing. Breathing is such a fundamental aspect of training, and I think we don't give it enough attention. So does the client inhale on the eccentric or the downward phase of the movement, in order to have their diaphragm and their lungs hold up their trunk? And then give them, pretty much back stability, and also lumbo-pelvic region stability as well, if they're activating the pelvic floor on the way down. And then do they breathe out and exhale on the concentric or the upward phase of the movement? These are things that you need to assist your client and pretty much talk them through and breathe them through the process. But there are some times when exhalation on the eccentric phase is quite more apparent, and this is really good in Pilates and yoga and those type of movements. But I find when they're weight-based movements, it should be the contrary. You should breathe in on the way down and breathe out on the way up. I find that just allows the client to have a system to their lifting practices, and it should be quite a common thing. Also, you should be prescribing to your client when they should be activating their pelvic floor. Sometimes I actually walk with the client and I'll clench my fist and then I'll let go. I'll clench my fist and then I'll let go. And that gives them a visual cue as to what they should be doing internally within their pelvic floor. So there's a lot of strategies that you can use. Now, if the person, coming back to my initial conversation, if the client is a beginner, I want to assess the overhead squat. I've always said this, and the overhead squat using a barbell or a light broomstick or anything that's a rod, really, that is the fundamental. And before I even get them to go into the bottom phase of the overhead squat, I want to see whether they can activate their rhomboids. So the rhomboids are the muscles inside the upper back or the thoracic region, just under where the trapezius lay or the lower traps, and you want to see whether you can squeeze your shoulder blades. Now, this is when you're holding the broomstick in the overhead position with your thumbs pointing up, okay, and it's a pronated grip, so the thumbs on the inside. When they're trying to squeeze their shoulder blades together, can they actually squeeze them inwardly together? Okay, can they retract them together? A lot of the times, if there's a shoulder injury involved, they would find that difficult. But then once they can switch on both of them, you then ask them, can they switch on just the right shoulder blade and then just the left shoulder blade? And can they have them working them in sync. Now, the other thing to focus on, because they're focusing all their attention onto the shoulder blades, what is actually happening to their pelvis at the time, and are they hyperextending the knees, do they have soft knees, and so on. So you must encourage the client to activate their core or their trunk by pulling their navel into their spine, and that will ensure that you've got a neutral pelvis level with the ground. Then go back to the shoulder blades and see whether they can activate them. If they can, then they are ready to attempt the overhead squat using the broomstick. Now, as they lower down into the squat, you're mainly looking for whether their shins are going to be perpendicular to the floor, as vertical as possible. Okay, a lot of the times the knee will shear over the toes, and that's when you know, in order for them to stay upright, they need to then forsake their ankle mobility. Now, that's not a good thing either. So then you've got to understand, okay, is it their thoracic region that's tight, or is it ankle mobility in dorsiflexion? Is that really tight? So they're the two things I would look for. Then once I've done that, I would encourage my client to raise their toes or point their toes into the air. Now, by doing that, now they're using their posterior chain and using their gluteals to activate. Once we've done that, okay, I'd ask the client to stand up again, and I'll take the actual broomstick off them, and then I'd reassess and see whether they can actually activate their glutes. Now, activating your glutes is not squeezing your butt muscles. All it is doing is trying to switch on one gluteal, okay, and then let it go, and then switch on the other gluteal. Now, what you're trying to do is create a brain synapse or a neural pathway to that glute, and it's just a switch. It's almost like someone's just flickered it, or there's been an energy transfer to it. This is quite a challenging task for clients who have never done this. Now, I truly believe that no one should move on to a squat of any sort, let alone an overhead squat, if you can't activate those gluteals. Okay, so what you need to do is follow a due process to try and get them to switch on and build up that mind-muscle connection. So if they can, then you're ready to continue with the overhead squat. Okay, if they can't, then you must regress and ask the client to lay down on the floor. Now, if they're laying face down in the prone position, ask them to try and switch on their glutes. Now, 9 times out of 10, they'll be able to switch it on. Now, what is actually happening? Then get them to stand up, and then they can't switch it on. You go, wow, why is that so? And they find this quite a challenging yet an interesting little activity. And the reason why is because there's something to do with their pelvis now. So when they let their pelvis relax in a neutral position on the floor, they can switch it on. So then you ask the question, is it tight hip flexors? Okay, is it tight erectors in their lower back, and so on? This is your role and responsibility. Now, you can understand why fitness professionals like myself can get frustrated, because then you see a client go out to the gym and they start lifting heavy weights, or they're lifting barbells using functional movement, and they can't switch on these fundamental muscles. That's the risk for injury. Okay, and long-term injury, especially when you're doing multiple repetitions loaded up. Okay, I can't think of anything worse. And sometimes when I see it in the gym, I have a shared responsibility to go up to these people and say, hey, did you think of this? Did you think of that? But then also there's a fine line between being rude and people, not knowing you. So, and these are sometimes the frustrations that we experience. Nevertheless, if you are listening to this podcast, you do have a responsibility with yourself or your family members or for the clients that you train to just slow down every now and again and look at the fundamentals, okay? So once you've got your gait pattern, you've got your gluteal switching on, you've got your rhomboids, I believe they are the most fundamental ones, okay? If you can't get the rhomboids switching on, okay, well then you need to go to some basic movements, maybe some lat pull down at a light weight. You can lay on the floor in the prone position and try and switch on your shoulder blades or the rhomboids that way. But the most important thing, try and keep your traps out of it. A lot of the times the client will be squeezing their neck muscles instead of their rhomboids. So you need to encourage them to depress or pull their shoulder blades towards their feet, okay? And that will help lengthen the neck. Then, do we then move on to some form of a load? Now, this could take weeks, okay? Some people could take a few days, but it could take actually weeks before this is achieved. Then when we do the loaded thing, or with a weight, we don't want to increase the repetitions, of course, because we're going to fatigue very quickly, and then we're going to go back to our old ways. So you want to lift a load that is comfortable, say at around 40 to 65% of intensity. Now, you're not going to test a 1 RM of an overhead squat, but based on their back squat, you get an idea, or based on their rate of perceived exertion. Okay, they should be able to talk to you while they're doing the actual movement, and you want to aim 4 to 6 repetitions. Now, talking about the overhead squat, this is way before clients are doing burpees and so on. So this is the fine line, and you need to understand in terms of the programming or what you design for your clientele, which order you're going to do it. I always come back to the fundamental continuum, okay, and we look at flexibility, mobility, balance and stability in those areas, okay, sort of like your preparatory phase things, and then you'll go into a base strength program, okay. Then you can then move into your functionality, your plyometrics, your sport specific, your agility, and so on, and then you move into your power. Okay, so anything in those, there are sort of 3 distinct phases or continuums that you must go through before you get into the sport specific, very detailed type of training. And the thing that scares me is people try and jump up to that, loaded functionality too quickly. Okay, and aka things like pull-ups on the bar, keeping pull-ups and so on, when they haven't done the fundamental, which is 10 repetitions of a pull-up or a chin-up. I think there's some rules that you must create for yourself before they can move to the next level. So for example, a rule that I always had way before my lifting is that I would go up by only 5 kilo increments on the squat, and then after a year down the track, I would increase it by only 10 plates as a fundamental on each side as a fundamental squat. And then as I got into my third training phase, I then would increase by 15 kilos on each side as I would move up. I would never increase it by a 20 kilo plate. Even at my, I suppose, high level or advanced level of training, I never put 20 kilos on a given weight. Okay, it was always an incremental thing. Whereas on the bench press, I would only increase by 5 to 10 kilos every time for every set. So these are the things you must look for in your clients, or if you're training in a gym, these are the things you must try for yourself. But they're very, I suppose, personalized, okay? And also depends how many sets and reps you're going to do, okay? But for joint care, I think you have to be very careful how much or how quickly you go up in weight, and also the number of sets that you choose to do. And like I always say, it comes back to the goals and what your training agenda is going to be. So I use the word a shared or a collective responsibility. And what do I mean by that? I think the way the fitness industry is heading and moving in leaps and bounds is that you will no longer have the responsibility of just one trainer in charge of one client. I think one-to-one personal training is evolving very quickly, and we're getting large groups and so on. But it's more than that. It's a change in thinking in the sense that it is a collective. So when a client walks in, sometimes I purposely won't greet them straight away. I'd like to see what they do on the floor before I actually instruct as to what they should do. And 9 times out of 10, what you'll find is they will do some form of cardio first. And that is great. That means they know that they should do some form of a warm-up prior to any exercise. And they're empowered enough, and they're not just going to sit there in the waiting room, they're empowered enough to start taking action or a responsibility for their own action. And that's the thing that I really enjoy what I do. Sometimes it may come across as me being late, for example, but there is actually a strategic plan, and you want to employ your client, empower your clients, and then later on you say, hey, I came at 5 to 10 minutes later, and this was the reason why, and I'm happy to stay an extra 5 minutes afterwards. So you need to inform your clients, but at the same time, you want to do things in a way that they're almost like blind tests and assessments to see how far they're improving. So where we're heading in terms of the social aspect or the sociocracy of the fitness industry, and that is, together as a collective, we are trying to create a treatment plan. I've seen really nice business practices where you would have a number of trainers working within a particular company, and no one is really assigned a client. What it is a collective banner of trainers that will train for the best interest of the company, and the company itself then has responsibility for each and every client. So when I see them train, you may see a different client with a different trainer, and then a week later I see that client with another trainer, and it just works really nicely. So the reason why this is where the fitness industry is moving is because if that trainer is not there today, or they're sick for some apparent reason, or they're on holidays, the system still runs, and it doesn't really matter because the clientele know that it is the collective of trainers under the company banner that will take care of them. And you start to lose this whole, but I only want that trainer, I only want that trainer. I think these clicks that you get with trainers start to get lost, and you create this really nice professional environment. So if there's anything that I see the future of the fitness industry, it's something in those lines, in the sense that it is a collective rather than an individual or individualized aspect to your trainer. Because if you are away, then that is a risk to your business, and also it's not fair to the client. If we always come back to the theme today, and that's that collective responsibility. If you're away or on holidays, well, what happens to the client? I don't think that's fair. And if we put the client first, or people first, then this system definitely works. So this is the close of PT Podcast with Eric for this edition. And the main thing to walk away with is the responsibility that fitness and sporting coaches and allied health professionals have with our clients in the assessing process, and also to know their training ages and how far and how fast you can progress a client. But it also is an acknowledgement that the fitness industry is moving fast, and it's moving with leaps and bounds, and you need to keep up with it. And it's also understanding that we do have a corporate social responsibility outside of our clientele. And whatever we prescribe to our clients, they're going to tell their family and friend members, and you're going to lose at least 80% of what you just told them, but they're going to still pass it on as if it was learned knowledge with an objective. And you need to be able to do that with confidence and explain to them, I know you're going to pass this information on. These are the main things I think you should tell them. And then there is that responsibility, and you can sleep at night knowing that you have helped a wider community.